Gittin Daf the Gemara concludes its last sugya about an Arav and a Kablon, two different types of a guarantor on two different types of monetary obligations, that of a loan and that of a ksuba. The Gemara will discuss the level of shiba that there is there. Then the Gemara will go to a new sugya discussing when you owe money to Yisomim and you've upgraded your chiyuv, whether the upgrade works against the Yisomim as well. So let's see the Gemara. In our last sugya, we had discussed two types of guarantor. So a guarantor, what we call an arev, is someone who promises to pay in place of somebody if that person cannot pay himself. There's two types of arev. The standard arev is where, let's say, Reuven owes money to Shimon, so the arev comes along and he signs and says, if Reuven can't pay, then I promise to pay. But you have to collect from Reuven first, and if he can't pay, then Shimon could go to the arev. An arev kablon, or the word kablon is what we use here, is where the arev, which we'll call the kablon now, actually took the money that was meant to go to Reuven, which Reuven himself is paying back for. He's the one who received that money from Shimon, and he gave that money to Reuven. So when Shimon wants to come collect, he doesn't have to go to Reuven first. He could go to the arev first, because Shimon could say, I gave you the money, you're the one who's responsible for it. Now in Ksuba, you could also find a situation of a kablon, even though there's no loan that's made. So what could happen is that the husband actually set aside money to give to his wife for her ksuba. He gave her the money to hold on to collect the ksuba from, and then she gave that to the arev. The arev went and gave it to the husband. So now, if she wants to claim her ksuba, she can actually go to the arev, which is what we'll call a kablon in this case, before the husband. Either way, the difference between an arev and a kablon is as follows. If someone is an arev, he only has to pay if the original balchav, the one who owes the money, defaulted on the loan. That is, he was asked to pay and he established that he couldn't pay. Then the creditor could go to the arev, go to the guarantor. However, if he's a kablon, the creditor could actually go to him first, and he's responsible first. And then it's the arev's problem to go and collect from the person that he's guaranteeing. Now, as far as what kind of shibud he creates, how much he obligates himself and how much he stands to lose, that he really owes it. So a kablon obviously has accepted much more responsibility upon himself, and therefore it's much more likely that he really was mishabed himself, he really created a lien upon himself. On an arev, it's less likely. Now, there's another factor to play in here, and that's, are they compensating somebody who's losing money, or are they just compensating someone who wants to gain money? So ksuba, the woman who's getting paid for her ksuba, she didn't lose anything, and therefore there's less of a reason for the arev or the kablon to be mishabed themselves than she's just not going to collect ksuba. It's about chayv, though, that someone who lent money and now he wants to get it back, he has a loss of money here. So if the arev or the kablon aren't going to pay it, they're literally causing a loss. It's much more likely that they are mishabed themselves. So the Gemara discusses all four combinations of arev, kablon, and bal chayv and ksuba. The Gemara says if you have both things leading themselves towards creating a real shiva, so you have a kablon on a bal chayv, so there everybody agrees that he is mishabed. On the opposite end of the spectrum, if you have an arev, not a kablon, just a regular arev on a ksuba isha, so there everybody agrees he's not mishabed himself. The question is, what if you have one and one? What if you have a kablon on a ksuba and you have an arev on a bal chayv? So that, the Gemara says, is a machlekes. There is one who says that he is mishabed himself, even if the bal chayv, even if the leiva, the borrower, or the husband don't have any property of their own, he's still mishabed himself. And there's an opinion that says he's only mishabed himself if the person himself has money. That's because he assumes that he's going to be able to pay it back himself. But he doesn't have any, then he's not mishabed himself. What's the halacha? So the Gemara says in all cases, he's mishabed himself, even though the leiva doesn't have any money, except for a ksuba on a regular arev. Ksuba on a regular arev, that is really far-fetched. Even if the leiva has money, he's still not mishabed himself. All he intends to do is a mitzvah. He intends to put down his name and say, okay, I'll guarantee this. He doesn't intend to lose anything. He doesn't intend to take the place of anybody else's losses. He just wants to guarantee so that he can allow that person to get the loan that he requires. Now, the Gemara just adds a comment on the previous sugya before this, where we had said that Mar Zutra said that the halacha that a ksubas isha is only collected from ziburas, from the lowest quality of land, is only if it's being collected from the yisomim, from the inheritors of the husband, not from the husband himself. So the Gemara rejects that. The Gemara says that's obviously not true, because if you look in the brisa which listed the reason that the woman only gets from ziburas, the reason that was given is because we want to sweeten the deal for the husband, because women want to get married more than men do. And therefore, in order to make it easier, to make the men more willing to get married, we said he's only going to have to pay ziburas for the ksuba. That is obviously referring to the husband. It's not referring to the yisomim, the inheritors, because that doesn't apply to them getting married. And therefore, this is obviously doesn't fit. And the Gemara concludes that this is indeed a severe kasha on Mar Zutra, who said that, and the Gemara leaves it as a tiyufta. Okay, now the Gemara quotes another halacha here, the halacha of an upgrade. So Gemara quotes Mar Zutra, the son of Rav Nachman, and the name of Rav Nachman, who says, what about a shtarchav? Shtarchav is somebody who lent money. So you have, let's say, Reuven lent money to Shimon. Reuven's the lender, Shimon's the borrower, and they wrote a contract. And in the contract that Reuven wants to use to collect, he wrote in an upgrade to land quality. Normally, a Baal Chayv only collects from the Beinanis, the middle level. Now, if he's collecting from not Levi himself, but from Levi's inheritors, from Levi's orphans, then he doesn't even collect from the middle level. The halacha is that he collects from ziburas from the lowest level. So here, on this case, the Baal Chayv, that is Shimon, and Reuven lent the money to Shimon, so Shimon wrote for Reuven in his shtar that he could have an upgrade and he could collect from Idis from the higher level. So if Reuven and Shimon are both around, okay, so they agreed on the upgrade. Reuven collects from the Idis, the higher quality, and not from the Vaininus, which is normally what the Baal Chayv would receive. Question here is that Shimon actually had died, and Reuven's coming to collect from the inheritors. Normally, you only collect from ziburis from inheritors. Here, he wrote an upgrade for idis. So what does he collect? So Mar Zutra Beit Rav Nachman, said the name of Rav Nachman, that the halach is he only collects from ziburis. Because since they're yisaimim, the fact that it's yisaimim overrides the upgrade. Now, said Abaye, that is obvious, because normally the halach of a Baal Chayv is that he gets the Beinanis, but yet from the orphans he only gets ziburis. So here also, even though in this case normally he should have gotten idis, he should also only get ziburis. That should override whatever it said, whatever he normally would have gotten Beinanis in the standard case, or idis in this case because he had an upgrade. Now, Rava disagrees. And Rava says if you look at the reasoning, it doesn't add up. Because the reason that a Baal Chayv normally gets Beinanis is derabanan. The real halacha midairaisa, a Baal Chayv should only collect ziburis. How do you know that? Because like Ula said that the reason that a Baal Chayv gets ziburis is because it says in the pasuk b'chutz tamid, when you're collecting a collateral, and the person should bring things out to you. So it means you're leaving it up to the person to give you what he wants as a collateral, and what's he going to give you? He's going to give you obviously his least valuable thing, and therefore, since we're learning the halachos of Baal Chayv out of there, you take the least valuable thing. So deraisa, the Baal Chayv should only be receiving ziburis. Why does he get Beinanis altogether? So like we said, that is a takonas chazal to make it, to incentivize people to lend, because nobody wanted to lend if they knew that they were only going to get back ziburis. So that to make it easier for loans to happen and allow people to access funds that they need, the Chazal made a takana that the Baal Chayv gets actually from the Beinanis, not just from the ziburis. Now, when you're talking about yisaimim, orphans, so there the Rabbanan did not apply their gzeira, and that's why the yisaimim that's why from yisaimim you collect only ziburis, because you go with the halacha midaraisa. Now, here though, when he wrote him an upgrade, so his halacha midiraisa is that he gets idis, because that's what he agreed to. That's what it says in the shtar. So how does yisaimim help? How are yisaimim going to defeat halacha deraisa? All we did for yisaimim was we took off the halacha derabanan and put it back on the deraisa. But here you want to say that the halacha deraisa changes? How is the logic? How should that make sense? So the Gemara, there's a kasha on Rava's logic here, and that's from a Raisa brought by Avram Chayzah. It says, look at a mazik. A mazik has to pay idis midaraisa, but to yisaimim, a mazik only pays ziburis. So according to Rava, that there's no mechanism by which you drop from the halacha deraisa of idis to ziburis for yisaimim, So why here does it go down from Idis to Ziburis for the Yisaimim? This doesn't fit with Rava at all. So my answer is no, it does. We're referring to a specific situation where it's actually a derabanan. What's that? So we're in Rabbi Shmuel's opinion, and we're talking about a case where the mazik's ziburis is equal to the idis of the nizik. And Rabbi Shmuel holds that midoraisa you go by the idis of the nizik. And therefore the mazik gets away with giving his ziburis, because it's equal to the idis of the nizik. Now, there are Rabbanon were mitaken that he actually gets the ziburis of the mazik, and he doesn't get away with it. So that takana is the Rabbanon. That's where we said for Yisaimim, you could actually only pay the ziburis of the mazik and go with the deraisa where you're paying only the idis of the nizik. Now, the Gemara has another kasha on Rava. The brisa brought by Rabbi Eliezer Neo Yisrael, who says as follows: you cannot collect from the property of Yisaimim except from ziburis. You can only collect ziburis from Yisaimim. And he adds three words, afila and idis, even if they are the idis. So what does that mean, even if they are the idis? Someone says it has to mean, even though you wrote idis in the shtar, you still can't collect it if it's from Yisaimim. You can only collect from ziburis. That must be what it means. Clearly against Rava, who says that if you wrote idis in the shtar, you could collect idis even from Yisaimim. So where it says, no, this is referring to very specific cases. It's referring to the case of the idis that jumped. That is, that the idis that was written into the shtar got destroyed. Either got taken away, confiscated, got flooded, got destroyed by the wind, whatever it was destroyed, so you can't collect that anymore. In that situation, you should really be collecting from a lower level. You lost your shivud, so you really go back down to ziburis. Now, there are abundance that you can collect from the baininess under certain circumstances, like tinel, delis, miftalevus, not to prevent people from lending. However, since it's Yisaimim, you go back down to the lower level of zibur. So the Gemara quotes it, you find this halacha, says that somebody's a mazik, and he should really be collecting from the idis, but the idis jumps, the idis gets destroyed, he really goes down to the baininess to collect that, and that's also only midrabanan. And if it'll be a situation of Yisaimim, then you'll go with the din deraisa and I'll collect ziburis. Gemara now says there was a shaila about this halacha that you only collect ziburis from Yisaimim. And again, we'll talk about a b'chayv, somebody who lent money. So Rav Achdabai Bar Ambi had a shaila. Is this true if you're collecting from Yisaimim who are children, or even if they are adults? What's a shaila? What is the reason that we said that you only collect from ziburis if you're collecting from Yisaimim? If the reason is because we want to take care of the orphans, because no one can advocate for them to sell their ziburis, we won't be able to sell their ziburis, therefore we want their ziburis to be used to pay back obligations of the father. So if that's only true by children, it would not apply to adults. It would apply to adults if the reason they collect from ziburis is because the whole reason that we ever moved off ziburis doesn't apply. Why do we ever move off ziburis and say b'chayv collects from baininess? Because otherwise people wouldn't want to lend money. So people are lending money, they're not thinking about what if the guy is going to die and I'm going to collect from his Yisaimim. And therefore, in a situation like that, if they get stuck with ziburis, it's not going to prevent them from lending. They need to know in the standard situation where I'm collecting for the person, he's alive and he's healthy, there's no issues. They need to know that they're not going to get stuck with ziburis. You're going to change the halacha in these weird cases, it's not going to affect how willing they're going to be to lend. So that's the shaila. If you're collecting from Yisaimim, Gedolim, adult inheritors or orphans, can you collect from ziburis or baininess? Which is it? So Abai tries to resolve it by a halacha that it says some other halacha about collecting from Yisaimim. And the halacha is, if you want to collect from Yisaimim, you have to swear. And that halacha, it says clearly in the brisa, applies not only to children, but also to adults. So this would also apply not only to children, but also to adults. Someone wants to say it's not a proof. It's very different. The reason you have to swear is because if the original person who had the loan would be alive, he might say, I paid you. And if he says they paid you, then you have to swear. The children don't know whether he paid or he didn't pay. So therefore, we have to say on their behalf, hey, maybe he paid. So you have to swear that he paid. And that applies whether you're talking about children or you're talking about adults. That's not something that is worse for children than it is for adults. And that's why you have to swear in either case. But ziburis, maybe there's a difference. So where it says the halacha is know that if you collect from Yisaimim, you have to swear and you only get ziburis, whether you're talking about adults or children. That is the halacha. The Gemara now refers back to our Mishnah where we'd seen a halacha about collecting from land that has been sold. So if somebody owes money and after he's already created the chiyuv, meaning after he borrowed, he goes ahead and he sells some of his land. So there's a lien on that land, and whoever bought the land has to know that he bought it with a lien, and he will lose it if the lender wants to come take that land in order to get his obligation repaid. Now that lien is only accessible if the borrower doesn't have any land still in his possession, meaning first you have to take away the lien is on all the property that exists to the borrower at the time that he borrowed the money. Therefore, if there's any land still left, the lien has to be collected from that first. You have to take what's called the b'nei chayrin, the free land, before you go to the land that was purchased and take it away from the buyer. That's what the Mishnah says. So the Gemara has a question here. The Gemara says, Ami, again, asks the question, what if it wasn't sold, the land, it was given away as a gift? Do you say the same halacha that you can't take it away if it was given as a gift? So what's the shaila? So what was the reason that the Rabbanan said that you cannot take the land that has been sold, you have to, until you've used up all the free land? If it was because the purchaser is losing money, he spent money, he bought the land, and now it's going to be taken away from him, so then it would not apply to somebody who received it as a gift because he didn't spend anything. Or perhaps you say, no, it's also considered like he spent something, because the reason he's receiving the gift is because he must have done something for the borrower who's giving him the gift, and therefore he did invest in this relationship, and he is losing something, and you view it just like a purchaser. So what's the halacha? So again, we want to know if a person received the land as a gift, can you take that away before you take away the free land that's still owned by the borrower? So the Gemara has a bit of a complex proof to resolve this. The Gemara says, Mark Shisha, right of Chizah, said Rav Ashi, have a proof in the following scenario. If somebody was sick and dying, and he wanted to write a will, and he said, I want you to give 200 zuz to Reuben, 300 zuz to Shimon, and 400 zuz to Levi. Now, there is the halacha is in this language of the will that he said, there's no order to how he wanted to give it out. He didn't want to give it out in that order specifically. He just couldn't say it all at once, and therefore he had to say one at a time. But he didn't want one to get over the other, and therefore neither of them have any rights over the other. And if there's not enough money or land to go around, there isn't any, the last one's not going to lose any more than the first one. Now what happens then if someone comes to collect, he wants to take away some of this land? He can't take from any one more than the other. He can't take from the last guy and say your land was given away last, therefore I take yours first, because it was the most recent possession, which is what the halacha ordinarily would be if it wasn't that order. He doesn't say that because there is no order. They were all assumed to be transferred at the same time. He just couldn't say them all at once. Now, there's a slightly different language where the halacha changes dramatically. That's if he said, give 200 zuz to Reuven, and then afterwards give 200 zuz to 300, or however, here the Gemara doesn't say a number. Give 200 zuz to Reuven, and then afterwards to Shimon, and then afterwards to Levi. So in that situation, he says after it is a specific order, and he wanted Reuven to get first, and then Shimon, and then Levi. So therefore, whoever comes first is Zoicha, and if there's not enough money, then the last one's not going to get, because you have to satisfy it in the right order. Now, therefore, the last one received last, so if a Baal Chayv comes to collect, he's going to take the last owned land. So he would take away Levi's land first, and if that's not enough to satisfy his obligation, then he'll take Shimon's, and then he'll go to Reuven's. So the Gemara says the implication is that it has to be in this order, even if it was the last land would be Ziburis, and the first land would be the Baininus. You still take the Ziburis first. So even though that your halacha is Baal Chayv should be, you should have taken Baininus first, you still have to take Ziburis, which is what we had said in our Mishnah. So there, in our Mishnah we had said it about a purchaser, but here we're saying it as someone who he cleared. The case was that it was given as a gift to Reuven and Shimon and Levi. So you see, even though it's given as a gift, you still protect the rights of the person who got the gift, and you have to take away the free land or the land most give it away first. So the Gemara offers three answers why this is not proof. First, the Gemara wants to say we're not talking about a gift. When he said to give this land to Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, it's because he owed money to Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. He had borrowed from them. And he's saying, so the Gemara asks what he said to give. He didn't say to pay. So the Gemara says give means give as a repayment for my obligation. So the Gemara says, but then how could we be discussing who's first? You know, the order is whichever one lent the money first. It's in the order of the lending of the money, not the order of what he wants to give. And therefore, we should just check the contract of loans. The Gemara says there was no contract of loans. It was a milva al peh. It was a loan that was made orally. So the Gemara says, but then how does it say it's whichever is first in the shtar? What do you mean it's first in the shtar? You're saying there is no shtar. The Gemara says that's not referring to the shtar of loan. It's referring to the shtar of will, the shtar where he's saying to give over. This is all the Gemara's first explanation. The Gemara's second explanation is we're not talking about a loan, we're talking about a gift. But when it says to collect from the last one, it doesn't mean that the Baal Chayv has a right to go to the last one first because he was most recent. It means the Baal Chayv goes to the last one because the Baal Chayv can go to whoever he wants, but whoever he wants, if it's not the last one, is going to go to the last one and say, hey, I have precedence over you. He said me first before you, so you have to give me whatever was given to you. And that's why the last one is going to be the one to lose, not because the Baal Chayv has to go to the most recently given one way first. And our third shot is that we're talking about where they were all at the same value. We're not talking about where one was Zibur, someone was Idis, and one was Vaininus. If it was different qualities, then that would trump the order here. And you would not say that by Matana you also have to go to the last one. You would go to the Vaininus if that's appropriate, even if it wasn't the last one. Gemara refers back to the Mishnah. We have a new sugi here, and here we're talking about two situations in which a person cannot collect from